Hey there! Thanks for listening in and welcome to another Ellipsis Drive Podcast. Here we dive into the stories of new technologies and concepts that transform and empower the geospatial industry, and here we learn from the founders behind them. Today in the spotlight, the Tilebox-driven revolution to monetize space data faster, a topic that we at Ellipsis Drive also hold very close to our hearts. My name is Rosalie van der Maas, and I'm here with Laura Costa, co-founder of Tilebox. Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks for being here. Happy to have you. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and your path leading up to founding Tilebox?
Absolutely. Yeah. So basically, my background is in remote sensing engineering. So I come from deep within the industry, but I started working very early on for software companies. So I also have that kind of view on it. And I co-founded Tilebox with Stefan, which is the other co-founder, technical co-founder. And basically our goal is to, as you very well mentioned, it streamline how companies are creating data products from raw satellite data, and how can we speed up the path to commercialization, because there are many bottlenecks in there. And basically we've seen this gap in the industry for way too long.
Gotcha. And so those bottlenecks, let's zoom in on those a little bit. Like, could you paint me a picture or describe the status quo as you're currently seeing it when it comes to data processing chains of Earth observation satellite operators?
So basically what we've seen is that in the upstream sector, there is a lot of modularity and there are a lot of vendors in there, and it's fairly easy for a customer to combine those as their use case requires, right? I'm talking about the space service providers or even software providers for mission design and control, camera providers and so on. But once the customer have their raw satellite data, then there is no product that can really speed them and help them to build their own in-house data pipelines on top of that, such that they can then plug into any kind of downstream application, which is more end-user oriented. Basically we've seen a lot of bottlenecks in this data processing chain aspect. So we decided to create an abstraction layer. So that's what Tilebox is. It's basically an abstraction layer. It works on top of the infrastructure that, for example, Google Cloud provides, but we are not one cloud dependent, and this will come out of the architecture of the product. And basically what we want to do is it's a software that is designed for this streamlining of the process of creating a data pipeline. So in order to do that, we have integrations upstream, like for space service providers. So once companies launch a satellite, they have immediate fast access to all their data. And by data, I mean not only payload data, but ADCS, telemetry, and other kinds of data that usually they don't think about. So they have this centralized way to access all their data, very standardized and very high performance APIs. Then they can get into work immediately, right? They can start building their algorithms, and the way they can do that, it's in a very modular manner. So we know that there are many companies that have fantastic algorithms that they would also like to share or even monetize, but porting these different environments is very costly right now. Mm-hmm. So we are building this kind of a very modular system in a way that it should be easy, not exactly like plug and play, but it should be fairly easy to combine different kind of algorithms, integrate third-party algorithms, and create added value products. One of the main bottlenecks is that data many times is distributed across different locations and infrastructure. So how you handle this, how you start moving around data, which is it's very scary for many companies, and how you can also efficiently manage how this work that you're going to create is going to be distributed around this infrastructure. So that's what we really do. We basically handle all the infrastructure deployment, all the scaling, load balancing, everything from the data pipelines that our customers write.
So why do you think it is that no other companies have jumped in this particular space? Like, how is it that the spot was still empty for you guys?
I think it's very nascent and it's very recent. I think that many companies back in the day, they used to develop absolutely everything in-house. And by everything, I mean the hardware, the software, the infrastructure, absolutely everything. This nowadays, with the shift of paradigm on how the space industry is going is just absolutely not doable. It's like thinking that a CEO should be their own also experienced tax accountant, and like there are so many aspects that it's impossible to master all of them, and it should not be required because it takes too much time, and it's never going to be done in a proper manner. So what we've seen is we've seen already this moving a lot in the upstream sector. There is a lot of movement in here already. So we think, why not? It should also be done in what we call this midstream sector, like what connects the upstream with the downstream applications.
So I have another question about this, because I've spoken to, say, a handful of companies that have tried to sink their teeth into the challenge of automating and standardizing the processing of raw satellite data, like the raw byte stream, if you will. And it's always proven difficult because the sensors are so wildly difficult. So you already mentioned that for you, it's also an infrastructure challenge, and it's a combination of the knowledge of the satellite operator as well as your own to make this happen. But how do you scale that across such wildly different hardware?
You mean on the sensor part or on the data processing part?
On the processing part.
On the processing part, basically, because as I mentioned, we really want to bring, the concept is to bring the algorithm to the data and not the way around. So that's a very core concept of us. So basically what we do, we take advantage of also more affordable infrastructure, like for instance, spot instances, and in a way that still in a resilient manner, you can send work to those nodes and retrieve the results. So basically, for example, imagine if a node goes down, which happens many times with spot instances, it reloads automatically. So you don't lose the data. You don't have to reload it yourself. It's all auto-scaling. So in this manner, we really think that it has a huge benefit for companies. And we also have metrics regarding this on how much it optimizes cloud cost, how much it improves the way companies process their data, and how many new use cases you can access to, because you don't have the limitations of having to be stuck in one specific infrastructure. You can leverage the best of all of them. That's our approach. And we really think this is one of the major bottlenecks. There are many others, like integrations, like the proper algorithm development of it. But we really think this is one of the major bottlenecks, the same as how you go from an algorithm that you test in batch processing manner in big data, but how you move that into an operational data product, in an operational chain that gets triggered automatically when new data gets in. So this shift between development and production levels is something that also is not streamlined. And many companies really use a lot of their time rewriting code and managing this in a very manual manner. And we really think that we can streamline this process. We've proved it with a couple of customers, and we really want to push companies to just focus on really creating their added value.
Okay, so that does explain it a bit more to me. And do you know, this is extremely niche, and we also know that we sort of exist next to each other in the data stream. And even for me, it's not super logical to grasp, just right off the bat. So it is basically you not necessarily focusing on the algorithm challenge of things, but more on the scalable infrastructure challenge of things that makes this a scalable business for you.
Absolutely, because companies, their core know-how is either the hardware that they are sending to space or the algorithms that they are building on top of the data that they capture, right? That's not our core. That's not my IP. That's not what I try to do. What I try to do is say, okay, focus on that, and we take care of the rest. Says that you don't waste time doing that.
So would you say that you would also have synergy with companies who support operators in creating the algorithms that does a lot of the pre-processing from raw data? So that would be partners or potential partners as well?
Absolutely. Just think about it. If you have a modular system in which you record an algorithm when you have it, we as Tilebox, we don't care where the algorithm comes from or how the algorithm runs. We just want to have it registered in a way that our customers can leverage that. So if they want to use a third-party algorithm for some pre-processing, sure, so be it. We register into Tilebox, and then they can just use it, not only for one specific data processing chain, but in many of them as they see fit. This also opens the door for a lot of added revenue streams for our customers if they don't want to just sell the final data products, but also combine and give access to other companies to part of their data chain.
Got it. Yes, very interesting. So Let's talk a little bit about where your work happens. Because as I've understood, you're looking to move where the work happens from Earth into orbit. So can you tell me a little bit more about that roadmap and the idea and the relevance behind this? Because it's quite an undertaking. Why is it worth it?
Well, definitely. From the architecture side of the product, as I mentioned, is distributed computing, right? So just naturally, we can leave that in orbit as one more of the infrastructure that gets scaled. But also, it's just a natural benefit for every customer. Like not only because you reduce amount of data that gets downstream, you reduce latency, and you reach your customers faster, but because you really can leverage much better your assets. So right now, we know that in-orbit processing is mostly scripts calling out to co-processors, and we really think there are a lot of aspects that they can be optimized in there. So one thing that we can optimize is the whole software deployment aspect, right? Try to deploy in a space as simpler as you would do on Earth. Another aspect is like run some multi-step workflows or even prioritize tasks, saying, okay, I want this data processing pipeline to run first, or this specific area of interest, or even if you have communication in between satellites, I want that satellite to process first. So you can really prioritize your work. And you can also have observability on your payload. Like how is my payload performing? How are my logs, my tracing of my data pipelines? Even if you compute, as I mentioned, across different infrastructure or even satellites, you have all this information centralized. So this has a huge value for customers because then they can improve also their inner processes.
And why hasn't it been happening to date? Is that a hardware limitation, a software limitation? Was there a Tilebox lacking?
It's a bit of both. There is some hardware up there, so it's doable. There is not as much as right now we have offering on the ground, but there is also the software orchestration gap. Like there are a lot of AI applications that can run. Now, how you orchestrate that, how you leverage that in a parallel processing manner, in like big data chains, this is still not there yet, and that's where we think we can come in place, because then our customers can basically interact with the system the same way they would do on the ground, in space. So we really think that has a huge benefit for them.
Yeah, I can see that. So let's see if we can bring this into the realm of the slightly less technical or tangible for those who aren't with their heads up in space all the time. So Ellipsis Drive and Tilebox have entered into an MOU because of our shared mission to get valuable space data and their insights to market faster. So getting raw data processed efficiently and making it consumable for the downstream. Could you walk us through like a live use case or a scenario where the solution is making a difference or will soon start to make a difference?
Yeah, we have a couple of nice examples. One of them is the use case is to track space debris from space directly. Very challenging, but very interesting. And in here, our customers were using Tilebox from the very beginning. It was already integrated with their space service provider, so they had immediate access. Commissioning time was very much reduced. And basically, what we could track is that we could reduce their cloud costs up to 85% because of what I explained, being able to use spot instances, but in a very reliable and secure manner. Also, one thing that I would like to mention is that one big differentiator of Tilebox in this case is that the data always remains on the customer's accounts and they have full control also of their algorithms. That's not something we see. We deploy in their accounts and then they basically take over on how they want to use the tool. So yes, with them basically, there was no data loss in these spot instances. They could use the product very easily from the first day. Onboarding new members was 30-minute video call. So in 30 minutes, they were able to be productive with the data and the algorithms and the product. And they could create really nice samples of near real-time products that they are already starting to commercialize. So we could see how it speeds up the whole process for them. They could also visualize and study their payload performance within seconds over the month of data. So that was also very interesting for them because then they could iterate in the second and third payload that are coming.
So are you saying that you've basically proven a return on investment
Yes.
Perhaps just on reducing cloud cost only?
Only in that
almost
it can be, yes, only in that it's very tangible because it's the first thing many companies realize, but also what I mentioned, like really deep observability on your payload. How can you improve for the follow-ups with tangible data from the very beginning? How can you speed up commercialization? That's also a very clear return of investment as we see in our side. So this is something that this customer is using. They're going to use for the full constellation because it scales. It doesn't matter if they launch one satellite, 2 or 15, they can use exactly the same product, which is very reliable and secure. Another interesting example that I can mention is pre-launch simulation. So another customer that we have, they have not launched yet, but they are using Tilebox to create these simulations on how their system would look like with open data or third-party procured data. They can focus on creating some algorithms. They can focus on starting to get a taste of product market fit, showing it to investors, showing it to customers, improving also specifications with their payloads. This is also going to prove again that it speeds up the commissioning time. And also the modularity, because they are also integrating third-party algorithms. So basically, that's also a very nice example on how companies can really start thinking about their data processing pipelines way before they even launch the satellite. Because right after that, like if you start thinking about that, right after that, you're losing really valuable asset time. So this is another very nice example of how early on companies can also start using Tilebox.
So what would be the ideal time to start engaging with your company? Like when you spin up your satellite or your Earth observation satellite system, what is the sweet spot for you guys?
I think for us, or my approach is the earlier the better. The more control you have over your systems, the better. The earlier you have a system that you can work on without having to redo and rewrite code in 3 months, the better. I would say once they know, for example, which space service provider are they going to use, once they start getting these contracts upstream, then we can immediately come to play because we can immediately provide these compatibilities and they can start working, as I mentioned, with open data. We also got a lot of inbound leads of companies that already have 2-3 satellites in orbit and they are facing scalability issues. So that's also a very nice time to integrate. But yeah, I would say that the earlier the better. Don't leave data processing and software for later on because it's more complex than it looks like.
Yes, sometimes it really amazes me how companies, and like on the one hand, I get it, like you're doing so many things at the same time, and it's literal rocket science. But how you can have like such complex hardware up in space and so little preparation in terms of what happens next. And Ellipsis Drive, we usually become relevant when you have 2-3 satellites in space. You can also go earlier, but that's indeed when you run into scalability issues, when you actually want your data to be consumable for a downstream early user. But then we're still seeing the problems that you're currently solving. So it's it's out there. There's an opportunity for it, and there's lots to improve. So
I would say the risk your mission, the earlier the better. Have control over your systems and really understand how it can scale and how can you create added value on top of that.
Yeah, but it's also amazing. Like it's a convincing argument that you can also just save those cloud costs that early on. I mean, then there's really no reason to not take those steps. So it's a true enrichment. That's great.
Yeah, we're going to put use case studies out there so that people can see actually how our early on customers use the tool and which benefits it brings. And hopefully more people will be opening their eyes and their mindset towards early on the risking of missions, not only on the hardware side, which is very much controlled, but also on the software aspect.
So this has been your 2023?
Yes, this has been our 2023, yeah.
So lots has happened. What's going to be the biggest milestone or the couple of biggest milestones for you in 2024?
Yes, we would like to gather a few more customers to have more feedback over the tool, right? We're very early on, and even though we have a system that is operational, we want to improve it, right? And we want feedback from our customers to make something that is tailored for everyone and they like to use. We would like to start thinking about how we can lift it in orbit, start having conversations with hardware providers that they have GCPs and that they can provide us some sort of compute in orbit so that they can test it. But yeah, right now, like trying to also, we are an early on startup, try to find some product market fit, try to get more people and get more traction into the tool, and try to already start looking up and thinking, how can we lift it?
Great. Awesome. All lined up for next year then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're in touch, definitely.
Great. So with that, unfortunately, we are at time. So on behalf of our listeners, I warmly thank you for sharing your story. And if you're tuning in today and you'd like to know more about Tilebox, make sure to visit their website and socials. We'll make sure to leave the links in the description so you can go check them out. Thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Until next one.
Bye-bye.